The sun over Fort Redstone burned like a furnace that day. But the heat wasn't what had 282 soldiers standing in formation, backs ramrod straight, jaws clenched tight. Not a single one of them dared to even blink. The reason for their absolute stillness was Colonel Victor Harland, who was now inspecting the ranks. Harland was a man whose reputation preceded him. He was known for two things: his almost supernatural brilliance on the battlefield, and a temper so explosive it had become the stuff of whispered legends in the barracks. His glare alone could make the most hardened soldier break into a cold sweat. But today, the story wasn't really about him. It was about the person standing at the very end of the line, at the far right of the formation, almost out of sight. Stood Lieutenant Mara Vance. She was the only woman in the entire company, a fact that had defined much of her career so far. While others were tense, Mara was the picture of calm, still focused. She didn't look intimidating at first glance, but anyone who truly saw her could sense the quiet, coiled strength she held within, too. Every single inch of ground she stood on had been fought for. She had endured the dismissive whispers of her being a quota higher, the condescending smirks from fellow officers who doubted her abilities from day one. She faced them all down, and never once did she flinch. And that, more than anything, is precisely why Colonel Harland hated her. The thunderous sound of Harland's polished boots on the pavement grew louder as he marched directly toward her. He stopped just inches away, his voice cutting through the silent air. "Lieutenant Vance." You were late on voice, a low growl. But Vance didn't move. She didn't back down. The silence that fell over the formation was absolute, thick with tension. You could have heard a pin drop. Then, in a sudden, shocking movement, Harland raised his hand. It wasn't to point. "Your tactical report." Mara didn't look away. Her voice was steady, calm, and clear. "Submitted on time, sir." Harland's eyes narrowed into slits. He took another step forward, so close that his shadow completely swallowed her. "Don't you correct me," he seethed. It wasn't a signal. It was to strike her. A fast, humiliating backhand slap intended to break her spirit in front of every soldier she served with. But before his hand could make contact, something happened that no one expected. Mara moved. It was a blur of motion. Her hand snapped up, catching his wrist in midair. She twisted. A sharp, sickening crack echoed across the parade ground. It was a precise Aikido lock, clean, efficient, unmistakable. Colonel Harland dropped to one knee, a scream tearing through his clenched teeth. Vance stepped back, her posture perfect, her face unreadable. "Never raise your hand to a soldier under your command." "Sir." The 282 soldiers stood frozen, their eyes wide with disbelief. This moment of violent confrontation didn't just appear out of nowhere. The fuse had been lit 7 days earlier in a sterile briefing room. Mara had presented a new readiness plan. It was flawless, meticulous, and every single officer in that room had approved it. Every officer, that is, except for Harland. He had publicly attacked her work, insulted her experience, and questioned her competence in front of her peers. He tried to tear her down, piece by piece. But she stayed calm, refusing to give him the reaction he wanted. Until today. Today, he had crossed the one line that could never be uncrossed. Back on the parade ground, medics rushed toward the kneeling colonel. Harland, humiliated and incandescent with rage, pointed a shaking finger at Vance. "Get her in my office, now," he yelled. Mara showed no resistance. She simply turned and walked, her head held high, her steps even and sure. Inside the office, the door shut, and Harland's fury boiled over. "I built this unit," he hissed, his face contorted with hate. "No one will take your side. Your career is over." Just as he finished his threat, the office door opened again. Colonel Reeves, the base commander, stepped inside, his expression grim. "Saw everything," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Harland's rage collapsed into a stunned silence. Reeves turned his attention to Vance. "Return to your quarters, Lieutenant. I'll render my decision at 0800. The next morning, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Harlan stood with his arm in a freshly applied cast and sling. Lieutenant Vance stood before Colonel Reeves, awaiting her fate. Reeves began, his voice firm. Lieutenant Vance, after reviewing the witness statements and the parade ground footage, I find that your actions were justified. You acted in self-defense against an unlawful strike from a superior officer. Harlan erupted. This is outrageous. She assaulted me. Reeves cut him off with a sharp look. Colonel Harlan, you are hereby relieved of command, effective immediately. The silence that followed was cold, heavy, and final. Harlan's reign was over. The unit assembled once more on the same parade ground. But this time, things were different. Mara Vance wasn't standing at the end of the line. She was standing at the front. Colonel Reeves made the announcement that would change everything, effective, immediately. Lieutenant Mara Vance is appointed acting commander of the 14th Infantry Training Battalion. A ripple of sound moved through the ranks, quickly growing into a wave of genuine applause. Vance stepped forward, her eyes scanning the faces of the soldiers now under her command. In this unit, she declared, her voice ringing with conviction, no one stands above the law. Not me, not anyone. From the formation, a powerful chorus of voices responded as one. Yes, ma'am. Colonel Harlan's career ended not with a bang, but with a quiet, unceremonious dismissal. Mara's career, however, soared higher than she had ever imagined. And for years to come, soldiers at Fort Redstone would whisper the story. Their voices filled with a mixture of awe and respect. Did you ever hear about the day the colonel tried to hit her? They'd say the day she snapped his arm in front of 282 soldiers. Because on that hot, tense afternoon, Mara Vance hadn't just broken a man's arm, she had broken the silence. And in doing so, she became a legend. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more.